the Alpha King's mute daughter spoke her first word. She pointed at an Omega maid and whispered, "Mama." The great hall of the Greycliff Pack was a mausoleum of held breaths and terrified heartbeats. 500 wolves stood frozen, their scents a chaotic mix of fear and confusion. At the center of the dais, King Ulster Greycliff stood like a statue carved from grief and granite, his golden eyes wide with an emotion the kingdom had never seen him wear. Panic. Beside him, the Ice Queen, Zemelia, clutched her pearl necklace until the string snapped, the gems cascading to the marble floor like frozen tears. But no one watched the jewels fall. Every eye was locked on the small, trembling figure in the center of the room. Princess Isadora, the girl who had not uttered a sound in 7 years, raised a pale, shaking finger. She did not point at the king. She did not point at the queen. She pointed past the velvet ropes, into the shadows where the servants cowered, leveling her accusation at a woman in rags whose head was bowed in submission. The silence shattered not with a scream, but with a whisper that decimated a dynasty. The Greycliff fortress was built on secrets and stone, high in the Stormwood Mountains, where the wind howled louder than the wolves. To the outside world, it was a bastion of strength. To Zenobia Crestwell, it was a gilded cage, and she was merely the dust sweeping its floor. Zenobia adjusted the rough linen of her Omega uniform, wincing as the coarse fabric chafed against the scars on her shoulder, faded marks from a time she tried to forget. The scent of lavender wax and cold stone filled her nose as she scrubbed the long corridor leading to the royal nursery. It was forbidden for Omegas to make eye contact with the royals, forbidden to speak unless spoken to, and forbidden most of all to linger near Princess Isadora. But rules were made for those who had something to lose, and Zenobia had lost everything 7 years ago. "Scrub harder, Crestwell," a sneering voice echoed from above. Zenobia didn't flinch. She knew the voice of valiant Ironmare, the pack's beta and head of the Royal Guard. He smelled of polished steel and ambition that had soured into cruelty. "Yes, Beta Ironmare," she murmured, keeping her eyes on the grey marble. Valiant's heavy boots stopped inches from her hand. He crouched, his presence a suffocating weight. "The dignitaries from the Stormwood Pack arrive tomorrow. King Ulster wants the floors reflective enough to see his own sins. Do not disappoint him. Or do you need a reminder of your place?" "I know my place, sir," Zenobia replied, her voice steady despite the rapid thrumming of her heart. She didn't fear Valiant's violence. She feared what he represented, the unyielding wall between her and the truth. Valiant scoffed, standing up and kicking her bucket of water over. The soapy liquid spread across her clean work, soaking her knees. "Clean it up. And stay away from the East Wing. The princess is having one of her episodes." He stalked away, laughing. Zenobia watched the water spread, her jaw tightening. She waited until his footsteps faded before she rose. She didn't clean the mess. Instead, she moved silently toward the East Wing, slipping into the shadows like a ghost. The East Wing was silent, draped in heavy tapestries that muffled the world outside. In the center of the nursery sat Isadora Thornvale, the Alpha King's daughter. She was 10 years old, a delicate creature with hair like spun silver and eyes the color of a stormy sea, eyes that looked nothing like Queen Zemelia's piercing blue, and everything like the woman scrubbing floors down the hall. Isadora sat on a velvet rug, staring blankly at a pile of expensive wooden dolls. She was the silent princess, the broken heir. The healers said it was a trauma response to a fever in infancy. The mystics said it was a curse. Zenobia knew it was neither. It was a lock, and Zenobia held the only key, buried deep in a past she was forbidden to resurrect. She checked the hallway. Empty. The guards were changing shifts, a 90-second window she had memorized over 3 years. Zenobia slipped into the room. Isadora didn't turn. She never did. Not for the healers. Not for the king. But as Zenobia knelt behind her and hummed a low, thrumming melody, a lullaby about a moon that loved the sea, the girl's shoulders dropped. The tension vanished. Isadora turned slowly. Her face was a mask of porcelain perfection, devoid of emotion to the world. But to Zenobia, she was an open book of longing. The girl reached out, her small fingers brushing Zenovia's rough cheek. "My little star," Zenobia whispered, barely breathing the words. "They tell you you are broken. Do not believe them." Isadora's mouth opened, her throat working, but no sound came out. It was as if an invisible hand choked the words back. Tears welled in the child's eyes. "It's all right," Zenobia soothed, pulling a small, hidden object from her apron pocket. It was a rough carving of a wolf, made from common pine, not the imported mahogany of the royal toys. "Keep this safe. Tomorrow the castle will be full of strangers. You must be brave. Can you be brave for me?" Isadora nodded, clutching the wooden wolf to her chest. Suddenly, the heavy oak door creaked. Zenobia scrambled back, grabbing her rag and dropping to her knees, scrubbing a pristine spot on the floor, just as King Ulster Greycliff entered. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ulster was a giant of a man, radiating raw alpha power that usually forced Omegas to bare their necks in submission. He had dark hair, streaked with premature grey, and a face that was handsome, but etched with lines of exhaustion. He stopped when he saw Zenobia. His golden eyes locked onto her. For a moment, the mask of the king slipped. There was no disgust in his gaze, no command. There was only a profound, agonizing hunger, a look of a man starving at a feast he couldn't touch. "Leave us," Ulster commanded, his voice rough, like gravel grinding together. Zenobia stood, bowing low, keeping her eyes averted. "Yes, Alpha." As she passed him, the air between them crackled with electricity, the undeniable, biological pull of a fated mate bond that had been severed, denied, and buried under political alliances. Ulster's hand twitched at his side, as if he wanted to reach out and stop her, but he remained frozen. Zenobia hurried out, her heart shattering, as it did every day. She was the Alpha's fated mate, rejected for the sake of a treaty with the Thornvale clan, stripped of her rank, and forced to serve the woman who took her place. But the cruelest twist wasn't the rejection. It was the fact that Isadora wasn't Zemelia's daughter. She was Zenovia's, and the king had stolen her to save her life, or so he claimed, sealing the child's voice with a witch's binding to hide the truth of her Omega lineage. Night fell over the Greycliff fortress, heavy and suffocating. The preparations for the arrival of Alpha Whitaker Stormwood and his delegation were complete. The great hall was draped in banners of crimson and gold, the colours of House Greycliff, masking the rot beneath the foundation. In the royal chambers, Queen Zemelia sat before her vanity. She was a striking woman, sharp-angled and beautiful, in a way that felt dangerous, like a knife made of diamond. She brushed her blonde hair aggressively, her eyes fixed on King Ulster, who stood by the balcony, staring out at the rain-lashed mountains. She was in the nursery again, Zemelia said. Her voice was cool, lacking any inflection of jealousy, replaced instead by the tone of a warden discussing a prisoner. "The Omega." Ulster didn't turn. "She cleans the nursery, Zemelia. That is her job." "She cleans nothing. She lingers." Zemelia slammed the brush down. "She infects the girl with her scent. Do you think I don't smell it? The stench of her on my daughter?" Ulster turned then, his growl low and vibrating through the floorboards. "Isadora is safe. That is the agreement. You have your crown. You have the title of mother. Do not push me." "I have a mute embarrassment for a daughter." Zemelia stood, her silk robe flaring. "Tomorrow, Whittaker brings his son. He expects a betrothal, a union between our packs. If he realizes the girl is defective, or worse, if he senses she isn't pure blood, the alliance falls. And if the alliance falls, the northern armies will crush us. She is not defective, Ulster snapped, closing the distance between them. She is silent because she is protected. She is silent because you let a witch sow her voice, shut to hide her heritage, Zemelia hissed. You think I don't know? You think I don't know that every time you look at that Omega scrub woman, you wish it were me on the floor and her in this bed? Ulster grabbed Zemelia's wrist, not to hurt, but to silence her. His eyes flashed gold. Careful, Zemelia. The crown sits on your head, but the power in this room belongs to me. Then use it, she challenged, yanking her arm free. Send the Omega away. Send her to the mines, or kill her. As long as she breathes in this castle, Isadora will never be mine. And if she is not mine, she is useful to no one. Ulster turned away, his chest heaving. He couldn't send Zenobia away. The bond wouldn't allow it. Physical separation caused him physical pain. It was the curse of rejecting a fated mate. He kept her close to survive, and he told himself he kept her close to protect her. But deep down, he knew he was a coward. He was the king of wolves, yet he was ruled by fear. Down in the servants' quarters, the atmosphere was different. The air was thick with the smell of boiled cabbage and damp wool. Zenobia sat on her narrow cot, holding a small locket she had managed to hide from the guards for 7 years. Inside was a lock of silver hair, cut from Isadora on the day she was born, the day the midwives took her away. "You're playing a dangerous game, Zen," whispered mild-mannered Cook Hattie, the only person in the castle who suspected the truth. Hattie handed Zenobia a bowl of stew. "Valiant was asking about you today, asking about your shifts, asking why the king's heartbeat spikes when you enter the room." Zenobia took the bowl, her hands trembling slightly. "Valiant sees treason everywhere." "Valiant sees opportunity," Hattie corrected. "If he proves the king is compromised by an Omega, he could challenge for the Alpha title. He's looking for a weakness." "I am no weakness," Zenobia said, her voice hardening. "I am a mother." "To the world you are a ghost," Hattie warned. "Tomorrow is the grand gala. Stay in the kitchens. Don't go up there." "I have to," Zenobia said, staring into the dark broth. "I felt something today. The binding, the magic on Isadora. It's weakening." She tried to speak. "Hattie, she tried." "That's impossible. The Witch of the Crag said the silence was permanent unless the blood truth was revealed." "Exactly." Zenobia looked up, her eyes fierce. "The truth is trying to claw its way out. And if Isadora speaks without protection, Zemelia will kill her before the first sentence is finished. I have to be there." The storm outside battered the stone walls, but the real storm was brewing inside the castle walls. Fate was tired of waiting. The grand gala was a spectacle of excess. Chandeliers made of crystal antlers dripped light onto tables laden with roasted stags, exotic fruits, and rivers of wine. The air was thick with the sense of a dozen alpha bloodlines, a heady mix of musk, spice, and power. King Ulster sat at the head table, looking regal but hollow. Beside him, Queen Zemelia was the picture of maternal doting, constantly smoothing Isadora's hair, though her nails dug into the girl's scalp. Isadora sat rigid. She wore a dress of stiff blue velvet that looked like it swallowed her whole. Her eyes darted around the room, fearful, scanning the faces of the strangers. Alpha Whittaker Stormwood, a bear of a man with a booming laugh that sounded more like a threat, raised his goblet. "To King Ulster, and to the union of our packs. My son Jackson will make a fine mate for the princess. Once she blossoms." Whittaker's son, a boy of 12 with cruel eyes, smirked at Isadora. She doesn't say much, does she? I like a quiet bitch. Less nagging. The table laughed. It was a crude, brutal sound. Ulster gripped his goblet so hard the silver stem bent. She is contemplative, Whittaker, a trait your son might do well to learn. The laughter died. Whittaker's smile didn't reach his eyes. Careful, Ulster. Silence can be wisdom, or it can be emptiness. We need to be sure the girl is sound of mind. In the shadows of the serving alcove, Zenobia stood with a pitcher of wine. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She heard the boy's insult. She saw the fear in Isadora's eyes. She saw the way Zemelia pinched the girl's arm under the table, forcing her to sit up straighter. Do not react, Zenobia told herself. You are invisible. You are nothing. Wine, Whittaker called out, waving his empty goblet. Valiant Iron Mare, standing guard behind the king, snapped his fingers at the shadows. You, Omega, serve the Alpha. Zenobia stepped forward. She kept her head down, moving with the practiced grace of a servant, but her presence shifted the air in the room. As she approached the head table, Ulster stiffened. His scent changed, spiking with distress and longing. Whittaker paused, his nose twitching. He looked from the king to the servant. He was an old wolf, and he knew the smell of a mate bond, no matter how faint, no matter how buried. Zenobia poured the wine. Her hand was steady, but as she pulled back, her sleeve rode up, revealing the scar on her wrist, a crescent moon mark. Isadora saw it. It was the same mark Isadora had on her own shoulder, hidden beneath the velvet dress. A birthmark. The princess's breath hitched. A sound, tiny and sharp, escaped her lips. A squeak. The table went silent. Did she speak? Whittaker asked, leaning forward. She coughed, Zemelia said quickly, her smile tight. Just a cough. The air is dry. No, Jackson sneered. She made a noise, like a wounded animal. He reached out and grabbed Isadora's hand. Come on, princess. Bark for us. Let her go, Ulster growled, half rising from his throne. It's just play, Ulster, Zemelia hissed, grabbing her husband's arm. Sit down. Jackson pulled harder. What's wrong with you? Are you stupid or just broken? Isadora panicked. She yanked her hand back, knocking over the heavy silver goblet. Red wine splashed across the white tablecloth, staining it like fresh blood. It splattered onto Queen Zemelia's pristine gown. You clumsy little brat, Zemelia shrieked. The mask fell. In a reflex born of years of hidden resentment, Zemelia raised her hand and struck Isadora across the face. The slap echoed through the silent hall like a gunshot. Isadora fell back, her small body hitting the floor. No! The scream didn't come from the king. It came from the Omega. Zenobia dropped the pitcher. It shattered, shards of pottery exploding. She didn't care about the rules. She didn't care about the executioner. She rushed forward, throwing herself between the queen and the child, wrapping her arms around Isadora. Don't you touch her, Zenobia snarled, her eyes flashing with a defiance that no Omega should possess. The hall gasped. Guards drew their swords. Valiant stepped forward, his hand on his hilt, a cruel smile playing on his lips. This was it, the treason he needed. Get away from her, filth! Zemelia screamed, standing over them. Guards, seize this creature and take the girl to her room. Two guards grabbed Zenobia, hauling her back. She struggled, reaching for Isadora. Isadora, look at me! Isadora pushed herself up. Her cheek was red, her eyes wide with shock. She looked at the queen, the woman who had hit her, the woman who was cold marble and sharp diamonds. Then she looked at the Omega, the woman who smelled like warm bread and safety, the woman who hummed the lullabies, the woman who had just thrown her life away to shield her. The magic in Isadora's throat burned. It was a physical heat, searing through the witch's thread. The fear was gone, replaced by a primal, childlike need to claim what was hers. The room froze. King Ulster stood paralyzed, his worst nightmare unfolding. Isadora scrambled to her knees. She didn't look at the king. She didn't look at the nobles. She lifted her hand. Her finger, trembling but resolute, pointed straight at Zenobia, who was being dragged away by the guards. Isadora opened her mouth. The air crackled. The binding snapped with a sound like a breaking violin string, audible only to the wolves. "Mama," she whispered. It was soft, raspy from disuse, but in the silent hall it was a thunderclap. Zemelia froze. "What did you say?" Isadora turned her gaze to the queen, her eyes hard. She pointed back to Zenobia, and this time she screamed it, a wail of 7 years of silence. "Mama!" The word hung in the air, a physical weight that pressed down on the 500 guests in the great hall. "Mama!" For a heartbeat, the world suspended itself. Then, Queen Zemelia shattered the stillness. Her face, usually a mask of icy composure, contorted into a snarl of pure animalistic rage. She lunged, not at the child who had humiliated her, but at Zenobia. Her claws extended, gleaming like needles in the candlelight, aiming for the Omega's throat. "Die, you mongrel whore!" Zemelia shrieked. Zenobia didn't flinch. She didn't look at the lethal claws descending upon her. Her eyes were locked on Isadora, drinking in the sight of her daughter's defiance, a desperate farewell etched into her gaze. But the blow never landed. A roar shook the stone foundations of the fortress, a sound so deep and primal it forced the lesser wolves to their knees. King Ulster moved with a speed that blurred the eye. He caught Zemelia's wrist mid-air, his grip crushing. "Enough!" Ulster bellowed, his alpha command rolling over the crowd like a tidal wave. He shoved Zemelia back. She stumbled, her chest heaving, her blue eyes wide with betrayal. "She claimed her. That filth claimed my daughter in front of the northern court. Kill her, Ulster. If you are a king, kill her." Ulster turned to the guards, his golden eyes burning with a chaotic mix of fury and terror. He looked at Zenobia, who was now being held by 2 bewildered sentries, and for a second the mask slipped. He wasn't looking at a prisoner. He was looking at the only woman who made his heart beat, and he was terrified he couldn't save her this time. "Take the Omega to the Iron Keep," Ulster commanded, his voice devoid of warmth. "Seal her in the deepest cell. No one speaks to her. No one touches her. Any guard who harms her answers to me." "And the girl?" Valiant Ironmere stepped forward, his hand resting on his sword hilt, his eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "She is clearly unwell, my king. Confused, hysterical." Isadora stood amidst the wreckage of the spilled wine, her small chest heaving. She didn't look confused. She looked like a storm finally breaking. "I am not confused," Isadora said. Her voice was scratchy, raw, like stones rubbing together, but it carried the undeniable cadence of truth. She pointed a trembling finger at Zemelia. "You are cold. She is warm." Zemelia let out a strangled cry of indignation. "Get her out of here," Ulster ordered, his voice cracking. "Take the princess to the solarium. Lock the doors. Healers only." As the guards dragged Zenobia away, she didn't struggle. She twisted her neck to look back at Isadora. "Be brave, my star," she shouted, before the heavy oak doors slammed shut, severing them once more. The silence that followed was heavy with judgment. Alpha Whitaker Stormwood slowly began to clap. It was a slow, mocking rhythm. "A mute daughter who speaks only to name a servant her mother," Whitaker mused, stepping over the stained tablecloth. He picked up a shard of the broken pitcher. "And a king who imprisons the servant rather than executing her for treason. You have a very interesting definition of order, Ulster." "The girl is sick," Ulster gritted out, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. "The fever that took her voice, it affects her mind." "Does it?" Whitaker dropped the shard. It clattered loudly. "Because that looked less like madness and more like a family reunion. If that girl is not pure blood, if she is the whelp of an Omega, then our contract is void, and the Greycliff lands, well, they become forfeit. Ulster stepped down from the dais, towering over the other Alpha. Careful, Whittaker. You are a guest in my hall. Do not mistake my hospitality for weakness. And do not mistake my patience for ignorance, Whittaker countered, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I will stay, Ulster. I will watch. And if I find that you have tried to pawn off a half-breed bastard on my son, I will burn this mountain to the ground. The Iron Keep was less a prison, and more a grave dug into the mountain's roots. The walls wept freezing water, and the darkness was absolute, save for the flickering torch in the corridor. Zenobia sat on the damp straw, her knees pulled to her chest. She was shivering, the cold seeping into her bones, but a fire burned in her chest. She spoke. After 7 years of silence, Isadora had found her voice. The witch's knot was broken. Worth it, Zenobia whispered into the dark. It was worth it. Footsteps echoed down the stone hall, heavy, rhythmic, familiar. The scent hit her before the figure appeared, cedar, rain, and the metallic tang of suppressed power. King Ulster stopped at the bars. He didn't have the keys. He simply stood there, gripping the cold iron, staring at her. In the dim light, he looked older. The grey in his hair seemed to have spread in the last hour. You foolish woman, he whispered. It wasn't an insult. It was a prayer of despair. Do you have any idea what you've done? Zenobia stood, walking to the bars. She didn't bow. In this darkness, stripped of titles, they were just a man and a woman bound by a soul tether neither could cut. I saved her. Zemelia would have broken her jaw. You broke the kingdom! Ulster slammed his hand against the bars. Whittaker knows. He suspects. If he demands a blood test, then let him, Zenobia hissed, grabbing the bars on her side, her fingers inches from his. Let the truth come out, Ulster. 7 years. 7 years I have watched you play house with that ice witch. 7 years I have scrubbed your floors and watched my daughter call another woman mother while you stood by and did nothing. I kept you alive, Ulster roared, the sound echoing off the damp walls. The council would have killed you the moment I found you. An Alpha King cannot mate with a wolfless Omega. It is forbidden by the old laws. They would have executed you and left Isadora to rot in an orphanage. I took her to give her a life. I kept you here to keep you safe. Safe? Zenobia laughed, a bitter, broken sound. I am a slave in the house where I should be queen. And Isadora? You call that life? Silence? Isolation? She was dying in that silence, Ulster. Today she finally breathed. Ulster closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against the iron. The Witch of the Crags said the binding was absolute. If it broke, it means Isadora's power is growing. It's not just her voice, Zen. She's an Alpha's daughter. If she manifests power while having Omega blood, the strain could kill her. Zenobia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dungeon. What are you saying? I'm saying I can't protect both of you anymore. Ulster opened his eyes. They were wet. Whittaker has given me an ultimatum. Prove her lineage by the full moon, or he declares war. And Zemelia... He hesitated. Zemelia has demanded your head, to quell the rumors. Then give it to her, Zenobia said softly. If it saves Isadora, give her my life. Ulster reached through the bars. His large, rough hand cupped Zenovia's cheek. The spark was immediate, a jolt of warmth that made them both gasp. I cannot, he whispered. I rejected the bond, but I did not break it. If you die, a part of me dies. I would go mad, Zenobia. And a mad king destroys everything. Then what will you do? I don't know, Ulster admitted, the King of Wolves sounding like a lost boy. But you need to be ready. If the doors open tonight, you run. You run and you don't look back." He pulled away, the loss of contact leaving a physical ache in the air. He turned to leave, but stopped. "She called for you," he said, his voice thick. "Not me. Only you." He walked away into the shadows, leaving Zenobia alone, with the terrible hope that love might be the most dangerous weapon of all. Meanwhile, in the royal chambers, Zemelia was not weeping. She was plotting. She sat by the fire, turning a glass of wine in her hand. Valiant Iron Mare stood by the mantel, cleaning his fingernails with a dagger. "The king is weak," Valiant said. "He visits the dungeon. He smells of her." "He is compromised," Zemelia agreed coolly. "He thinks he can stall Whittaker. But I have a better plan." "Oh!" Zemelia stood, throwing the glass into the fire. The flames roared, green and blue for a second. The girl spoke because the binding broke. But a voice can be silenced in other ways. If Isadora were to tragically succumb to the madness Whittaker spoke of? If she were to fall from the high tower in a fit of hysteria? Valiant smiled, a shark sensing blood. Then Ulster would have no heir, and the pack would need a new line of succession. "Exactly," Zemelia walked to him, placing a hand on his chest. "You have always wanted the throne, Valiant. Help me remove the obstacles, the Omega and the Brat, and I will give it to you. Ulster will be too broken by grief to lead. You will step in. And I will remain queen." Valiant sheathed his dagger. "When?" "Tonight," Zemelia whispered. "The storm will cover the screams. The storm that battered the Greycliff fortress was the worst in a century. Thunder cracked like the whip of a god, and lightning illuminated the stained glass windows in jagged flashes. In the solarium, Isadora paced. The room was filled with expensive toys she had never played with. She clutched the rough wooden wolf Zenobia had given her. She could feel a strange humming in her chest, a vibration that matched the thunder outside. She wasn't just speaking. She was feeling everything. The vibrations of the guards' boots outside the door, the scuttling of mice in the walls, the distant heartbeat of the woman in the dungeon. The door handle rattled. It was locked. Isadora stared at the lock. "Open," she thought. "I want my mama." The wood of the door groaned. The iron mechanism clicked, hissed, and then melted. Molten iron dripped onto the stone floor. Isadora gasped, stepping back. She looked at her hands. They were glowing with a faint silver light. This wasn't werewolf strength. This was something ancient. Something forbidden. The door swung open. But it wasn't Zenobia standing there. It was Jackson Stormwood. The boy smirked, slipping into the room and closing the door behind him. "Well, well, Daddy said you were special. Didn't know you were a fire starter, too." Isadora backed away, clutching the wooden wolf. "Go away." Her voice was stronger now, less raspy. "Can't do that, Princess." Jackson stepped closer, his eyes dark. "My father sent me. See, we don't care if you're a half-breed. In fact, we prefer it. A queen with no royal blood is easier to control. We're going to take you, Isadora. Tonight. My father is going to rescue you from your crazy mother and your weak father." "No," Isadora said, her back hitting the cold window pane. "Yes," Jackson lunged, grabbing her wrist. "You're coming to the Stormwood. You'll be my pet. I'll make you bark whenever I want." Isadora screamed. But it wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of rejection. A pulse of silver energy exploded from her body. It threw Jackson across the room. He smashed into a display case of porcelain dolls, shattering them. He slumped to the floor, unconscious, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. Isadora stared at him, trembling. She had hurt him. She was a monster. Just like Zemelia said. "Isadora!" A hushed voice came from the balcony. Isadora spun around. Climbing over the railing, soaking wet and looking wild, was not a guard. It was Whittaker Stormwood, But he wasn't looking at his unconscious son. He was looking at Isadora with a hungry, terrifying fascination. "Incredible," Whitaker murmured, stepping into the room, ignoring the rain pooling around him. The legends were true. The Greycliffs didn't just hide an Omega child. They hid a silver blood. Isadora didn't know what that meant, but she knew the look in his eyes. It was the same look a wolf gave a rabbit before the snap. "Come here, child," Whitaker said, extending a hand. "I won't hurt you. I can teach you how to use that. Your father fears you, your mother hates you, but I can make you a goddess." Isadora looked at the door, then at the balcony. She had to run. "I want my mama," she said firmly. "Your mama is in a hole in the ground," Whitaker sneered. "But if you come with me, I'll let you say goodbye before I kill her." The threat hung in the air. Whitaker lunged. At that moment, the door, already damaged, was kicked off its hinges. Valiant Ironmere stood there, sword drawn, expecting to kill a helpless girl. Instead, he found the rival Alpha and a room destroyed by magic. "Treason!" Valiant shouted, seizing the opportunity to frame Stormwood. "Assassins!" Chaos erupted. Whitaker roared, shifting into his massive black wolf form, mid-leap, tackling Valiant. The two beasts crashed into the hallway, a ball of fur and fury. Isadora didn't wait. She grabbed a heavy velvet cloak from the bed, threw it over her head, and ran. She ran not away from the danger, but down toward the smell of damp earth and the heartbeat that sang to hers. She ran toward the Iron Keep, but as she descended the spiral stairs, she collided with a solid wall of muscle. Strong hands caught her. She looked up, terrified, into the face of King Ulster. Ulster looked at his daughter, really looked at her, for the first time in years. He saw the silver glow fading from her hands. He saw the terror, and he saw the fierce determination that was entirely Zenobia. "Papa?" she whispered, the word foreign on her tongue. Ulster's face crumbled. He scooped her up into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "I've got you," he choked out. "I've got you. We're going to get her. We're getting your mother." "Now?" Isadora asked into his shoulder. "Now," Ulster vowed, his golden eyes hardening into molten steel. "Tonight, the Greycliff pack falls, but the Greycliff family survives." The descent into the Iron Keep was a spiral into the belly of the mountain, a place where the air grew thin and tasted of rust and ancient sorrow. It felt different this time. It wasn't a walk of shame or a secret visit cloaked in shadows. It was a crusade. King Ulster moved with the momentum of an avalanche, his boots striking the stone steps with a rhythm that promised violence. Isadora clung to his neck, her small face buried in the thick fur of his cloak, her body radiating a heat that felt less like fever and more like a furnace waking up. The torches flickered as they passed, casting long, dancing shadows against the weeping walls. Down here, the storm outside was just a distant vibration, a trembling in the stone that matched the rage in Ulster's blood. When they reached the heavy iron door of the dungeon level, the atmosphere shifted. The air was thick with the scent of fear, sharp and acidic. 6 guards stood stationed there, their armor bearing the Greycliff crest, but their eyes shifting nervously. They were Valiant's men, hand-picked for their loyalty to the Beta's coin rather than the crown's honor. "Halt!" the guard captain barked, leveling his spear. His voice wavered, betraying the terror of facing an Alpha in full fury. "Beta Ironmere has ordered a complete lockdown. No one enters or leaves. By order of the acting regent." Ulster didn't slow down. He didn't even draw the sword at his hip. He simply let out a growl, a sound so low and resonant it vibrated through the soles of their boots and rattled the teeth in their skulls. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated dominance, the voice of a wolf who had remembered he was a king. Acting regent? Ulster's voice was a jagged whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "I am not dead, Captain, and I am not no one. I am your king. Move, or I will paint these walls with your treason." The captain hesitated. He looked at his men, then back at the towering figure of the Alpha. That split second of hesitation was his undoing. Ulster surged forward, a blur of motion too fast for human eyes. He didn't kill them. He was still a king who refused to butcher his own misguided subjects, but he was efficient. He caught the captain's spear shaft, snapping the wood like a dry twig, and backhanded the man into the stone wall. The captain slid down, unconscious before he hit the floor. The other guards scrambled back, dropping their weapons, the instinct to submit to the Alpha overriding their orders. Ulster stepped over the fallen men, kicking the dungeon door open. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the damp dark. "Zenobia!" Ulster roared, the name tearing from his throat. At the far end of the corridor, in the deepest cell, a figure stirred. Zenobia was standing at the bars, her hands gripping the cold metal until her knuckles were white. She had heard the commotion, the growls, the breaking wood. She saw them now. Ulster, with blood on his knuckles and a storm in his eyes, and Isadora, alive and glowing with a faint, ethereal, silver light, safe in his arms. "Isadora!" Zenobia sobbed, her legs nearly giving out with the sheer, crushing relief. She pressed her face against the iron. "You have her. Oh, goddess, you have her." Ulster didn't waste time with keys. He didn't look for the warden. He handed Isadora gently to the floor, telling her to stand back. Then he gripped the bars of the cell door. His biceps bulged, tearing the fabric of his tunic, veins popping against his skin like cords of steel. He channeled every ounce of his regret, every year of his cowardice, into his hands. With a roar of exertion that tore the breath from his lungs, he ripped the door from its hinges. The stone crumbled around the frame, dust billowing into the air as the heavy iron gate crashed to the floor with a deafening clang. Zenobia didn't run to him. She ran to Isadora. The king lowered himself, and the three of them collided in a tangle of tears and frantic touches. "You spoke," Zenobia wept, her hands framing Isadora's face, checking for bruises, for fever. "My brave girl, you spoke. I heard you. The whole world heard you. I found you," Isadora whispered. Her voice was stronger now, shedding the rasp of disuse. It had a musical quality, a resonance that seemed to hum in the air. She pressed her glowing palm to Zenovia's cheek, the warmth seeping into her mother's skin. "I'm not broken, Mama. I'm just loud." Ulster watched them, a fierce protectiveness swelling in his chest, finally displacing the fear that had lived there for a decade. He reached out, his large hand covering Zenovia's shoulder, completing the circle. "We have to move," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Valiant and Whitaker are tearing the castle apart. Zemelia has declared martial law. She will be waiting for us." "Let her wait," Zenobia said, standing up. She looked different. The submissive omega posture, the slump of the shoulders she had worn for survival, was gone. In its place stood a mother who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. "Where do we go?" "The crypts," Ulster said, standing and pointing toward the back of the dungeon. "There's an old ossuary tunnel that leads to the mountain pass. It opens out near the neutral lands. We can be across the border by dawn. We can disappear." "No," Isadora said. It was a single word, but it stopped both parents cold. They looked down at her. The 10-year-old girl stood firm, her feet planted on the damp straw. Her silver hair was floating slightly, as if caught in an invisible breeze, and her eyes were glowing like twin moons. "No tunnels," Isadora stated. Her voice echoed with a strange, harmonic resonance, as if two people were speaking at once, the girl and the wolf. "We don't run. If we run, we are guilty. If we run, they win. I'm tired of hiding. Isadora, it's not safe, Ulster pleaded, dropping to one knee to be at her eye level. Whittaker wants to take you. Zamelia wants to kill you. We need to regroup. It was never safe. Isadora stomped her foot. A ripple of silver energy shot out from her boot, cracking the stone floor. Dust danced in the air. I hid my voice for 7 years. You hid Mama for 10. Look where it got us. In a cage. She looked up at her father, her gaze challenging him with an intensity that made him want to look away. I am the Alpha's daughter. I am the Omega's blood. I am the Silver Blood. Ulster went still. Silver Blood. The ancient myth. The wolf born of 2 opposing castes who would possess the power of the moon goddess herself, a bridge between the earth and the sky. Whittaker had called her that in fear. Now she claimed it in power. If we leave, Zenobia said slowly, realizing the truth of her daughter's words, they will hunt us forever. We will always be the Broken King and his mongrel family. We will be fugitives in our own story. Then we fight, Ulster whispered. He looked at his mate and his daughter, and for the first time he saw not liabilities to be protected, but his greatest strength. He saw the fire in Zenobia and the magic in Isadora. We don't go down, we go up. He stood, his golden eyes hardening into molten steel. We go upstairs, and we take back our pack. The courtyard of Greycliff Fortress was a chaotic arena of rain and blood. The storm raged overhead, mirroring the battle below. Whittaker's northern wolves, massive and black as oil, clashed with the Greycliff Guard, but the fighting stopped when the great oak doors of the keep blasted open. King Ulster stepped out, not in armor, but in his torn royal tunic. On his right stood Zenobia, dressed in rags, but holding her head high like a queen, and between them walked Isadora. "Stop!" Isadora screamed. It wasn't a child's scream, it was a command amplified by magic. The rain seemed to pause in mid-air. Every wolf turned to look. "Look at them!" Queen Zamelia's voice cut through the silence. She stood on the upper balcony, flanked by archers. Valiant was beside her, looking battered from his fight with Whittaker. The traitor king and his pet, and the abomination. "The only abomination here is your heart, Zamelia," Ulster shouted, his voice carrying over the wind. "It is over. I claim Zenobia Crestwell as my true mate. I claim Isadora as my legitimate heir. The lie is finished." A gasp went through the Greycliff soldiers. To reject a political marriage was one thing. To elevate an Omega to queenship was heresy. "He is mad!" Zamelia shrieked. "Archers, loose!" The archers hesitated. They were looking at the little girl. "I said loose!" Zamelia grabbed a crossbow from the guard next to her and fired. The bolt flew straight for Zenovia's heart. Time seemed to slow. Ulster moved to intercept, but he was too far. Zenobia didn't flinch. She wouldn't give Zamelia the satisfaction of seeing her fear. But the bolt never reached her. Isadora raised her hand. The silver light that had been flickering in her veins exploded outward in a blinding dome of energy. The crossbow bolt hit the barrier and disintegrated into ash. The shockwave knocked the nearest soldiers flat. She stopped it," Valiant whispered, staring down in horror. "Magic. Wolf magic." Whittaker Stormwood, who had been watching from the shadows of the colonnade, stepped forward, his eyes gleaming. "The Silver Blood," he murmured. "She commands the energy of the pack, bonds themselves." Isadora lowered her hand. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were burning. She looked up at the balcony. "You tried to silence me," she called out to Zamelia. "You tried to make me nothing. But you forgot something." "And what is that, you little brat?" Zamelia spat, loading another bolt. "You can't silence the moon," Isadora said. She slammed her hands together. A pulse of pure white light shot up from the ground, racing up the stone walls of the fortress. It hit the balcony where Zemelia stood. The stone didn't break, it froze. The moisture in the air turned to instant ice, encasing the balcony and the Queen's feet in a prison of frost. Zemelia screamed as the ice crept up her legs, trapping her. "My turn!" Ulster growled. He shifted. The transformation was instantaneous. A massive, golden-furred wolf, the largest the pack had ever seen. He didn't attack the soldiers. He leaped toward Valiant. Valiant shifted too, a grey, scarred wolf, but he was no match for an alpha protecting his family. The fight was short. Ulster pinned Valiant to the cobblestones, his jaws around the beta's throat. He didn't bite down. He growled, a low, rumbling demand for submission. Valiant whined, baring his neck. Ulster shifted back to human form, standing over the defeated traitor. "You are stripped of your rank. You are exiled. Run before I change my mind." Valiant scrambled away, disappearing into the night. Ulster turned to the Northern Alpha. "Whitaker, take your wolves and go, or find out what my daughter can really do." Whitaker looked at Isadora, who was now leaning against Zenobia, the silver glow pulsing rhythmically. He laughed, a deep, booming sound. "I came for a conquest, Ulster, but I think I'd rather not fight a goddess in the making. Keep your mountain. I suspect you'll have enough trouble changing the laws of our kind." With a nod of respect to the child, Whitaker signalled his pack. They melted into the shadows of the storm. The courtyard was silent, save for the rain. Zemelia was trapped on the balcony, shivering, defeated not by force, but by the very element she claimed to rule, ice. The Greycliff pack, hundreds of soldiers, servants, and nobles, looked at their king. They looked at the Omega woman holding the hand of the glowing child. This was the moment that would break the kingdom or forge it anew. Ulster walked to Zenobia. He took her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers, showing the scarred crescent moon on her wrist to the world. He led her to the centre of the courtyard. He knelt. King Ulster Greycliff, Alpha of the Stormwood Mountains, knelt before an Omega. "I have failed you," Ulster said, his voice loud enough for all to hear. "I failed to protect you from the laws that say you are lesser. I failed to trust in the bond the goddess gave us. I let fear rule my crown." He looked up at Zenobia. "No more. If the crown demands I deny my soul, then I deny the crown." He reached up to remove the heavy gold circlet from his head. "No," Zenobia said. She reached out and stopped his hand. The crowd held its breath. Zenobia looked at the wolves who had scorned her, the people who had treated her as furniture. Then she looked at Ulster. "The crown isn't the problem, Ulster. The silence is. Don't take it off. Change what it means." Isadora stepped forward. She placed one hand on her father's shoulder and one on her mother's. The silver light flowed from her, wrapping around all three of them like a ribbon. "The Alpha protects," Isadora said, her voice clear as a bell. "The Omega nurtures. Both are strong. Both are needed." She looked at the kneeling soldiers. "Kneel," she commanded. Not with arrogance, but with the absolute authority of the Silverblood. One by one, the soldiers dropped to one knee, then the nobles, then the servants. They weren't kneeling to a king. They were kneeling to a family that had walked through fire and ice and come out whole. On the balcony, Zemelia watched, tears freezing on her cheeks. She realized then that she hadn't lost because of a mute girl or an Omega rival. She had lost because she had never understood that power without love is just a cold, empty room. The sun began to crest over the mountains, breaking the storm. The light hit Isadora's silver hair, turning it into a halo. Zenobia pulled Ulster to his feet. He kissed her, deeply, passionately, right there in front of the gods and the pack. The curse was broken. The silence was over. The laws of the Greycliff pack did not change overnight, but the heart of the kingdom shifted that very dawn. King Ulster ruled for another 40 years, but he never ruled alone. Queen Zenobia sat beside him, not as a silent figurehead, but as the voice of the people, the Omega who became the heart of the throne. And Isadora, she never stopped speaking. She became the greatest diplomat the Wolf Lands had ever known, bridging the gap between packs with her words and her silver blood wisdom. She taught the world that a voice is not just sound, it is the spirit refusing to be buried. They say that on quiet nights in the Stormwood Mountains, if you listen closely, you don't hear the howl of a lone wolf. You hear a harmony, a father's strength, a mother's love, and a daughter's song, weaving together into a melody that defies both crown and curse. If this story of courage and forbidden love moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales from the Wolf Kingdoms. Let your voice be heard in the comments below.